Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's discussion. It is 1 minute past 12, and we're kicking it off today. So esteemed speakers and guests, it is great to have you with us. My name is Katja Gershak. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for European Perspective. I'll be the moderator today and also the co-organizer along with the Eastern Europe Study Center from Lithuania, which we're very proud and it's great to have them as the co-organizers of today's event. We have some very interesting topics ahead of us today on European strategic autonomy in a globally interdependent world. So what is next for Europe? The topic of strategic autonomy, I think, has captured the spotlight of the European policy development and where we're headed in the future. And I think it's a big indicator of our geopolitical environment, of where we're finding ourselves and how things have changed from having much more stable a world that has much multilateralism in it to a more competitive world. And I think this is partially Europe's answer to start this discussion and to actually rethink its foreign and security policy along those lines. So it just kind of shows us in the complex environment in which we find ourselves in. However, we still have to take into account that we have really great interdependencies, especially in the digital world. So what does this all mean for us? What are the pitfalls that could lead to actually not protecting Europe, but to getting towards protectionism through strategic autonomy discussion and the concept of strategic autonomy? And how does the EU see itself vis-a-vis a rising technological competition between the US and China? And specifically, we should also address the importance of the transatlantic relations and the opportunities and challenges for Central and Eastern Europe. So we're going to try to fit a lot of this in within an hour. We have an excellent panel to help us do that today. With us are Dr. Laurynas Kasčiūnas. I hope I am really pronouncing these names correctly. He's the chairman of Committee on National Security and Defense of the Lithuanian Parliament. Welcome. It's great to have you with us. We have Dr. Uroš Svete, the Director of Information Security Administration of the Republic of Slovenia. We have Dr. Giedrius Česnakas, for the head of political science study program at General Jonas Žemaitis Military Academy of Lithuania. Welcome. Dr. Marko Grobelnik, AI researcher and digital champion of Slovenia at the European Commission from the Jožef Stefan Institute. Marko, thank you for being with us. I also know that unfortunately you have a slight problem in the schedule. You have to leave us a little bit early, so we'll have to let you go about 10-15 minutes early. And last but not least, Mr. Mindaugas Ubartas, who's the director of the director of Infobalt. And he will say one or two sentences at the start of what Infobalt actually does. So to actually kick us off, I would ask Dr. Kasčiūnas, how do we understand the term strategic autonomy? Let's start with that. And how do we kind of marry EU's strategy of multilateralism and engagement with policies that are focused more on autonomy?
Thank you very much. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation. Great to be with you. Interesting topic, of course. No, I'm not so optimistic on this concept, and I think a lot of thinking tradition in Lithuania be a little bit skeptic when somebody start to talk about European strategic autonomy, because in defense terms, in security terms, for us always is very important is the role of the United States of America. That's why we is always asking how it will affect relations, transatlantic relations, especially in defense and security terms. That's why I am not think what strategic autonomy is a good thing in itself. I think we should talk about the content. So if we talk about defense and security, of course, from my point of view, EU should go not to the strategic autonomy, but to strategic responsibility. If you want to have a role in international affairs, you have to share the burden with the United States, to be capable to defend itself, but not to duplicate NATO, not to create alternatives for NATO. And it's very, very sensitive question for Lithuania. And of course, the driving force of strategic autonomy is, of course, our ally, very good partner. It's first of all France. After Brexit, these discussions intensified, and of course, it's old Gaullist tradition, which of course is very interesting, and it's had a big impact on European geopolitical thinking. Have some moments which can be not very I would say will fit to Lithuanian and regional of Eastern Europe, Eastern and Middle Europe interests. Now, first of all, Gaullism and strategic autonomy. First of all, I will ask: it's autonomy from United States or autonomy from Russia and China? Because when we start to talk about European military, European army, of course it's a hypothetical scenario, but still it would mean what you are weakening NATO and strengthening the structure which can transform transatlantic link. And I think here is I would call it red line. And Lithuania is always saying, look, if you want to create some autonomy, please create the added value to NATO, not to duplicate NATO.
If I could just ask you one follow-up question to what you're saying. So when I asked you about strategic autonomy, of course, the first reaction was to mention the area of defense, which is where the actual concept, like you said, comes from. But if we are now going into the digital sphere and talking about strategic autonomy in the digital sphere, what does that mean to you, and how do you interpret that?
I'm not a big expert on digitalization, but of course, when I see now the big cleavage between two technospheres in international relations, China controlled technosphere and Western technosphere, I would say, and here, for example, 5G, we have big debate now in our parliament. I'm the main initiator of investment screening on 5G here in Lithuania, and on next week we will probably adopt the screening, which says what companies who would like and who could participate in 5G development, network development in Lithuania, can be only the companies from EU, NATO countries. It means that third countries and China will not allow to come to our 5G. So it's about how I understand here. But if you look at the companies who are dominating in the West, it's not American companies, it's Finnish, it's Swedish companies, it's Nokia, it's Sony Ericsson, and of course my biggest interest is to create a safe 5G network in Lithuania. And I see a possibility for Western companies to participate in that process. So 5G now is a very, very priority question in Lithuania. And next week we will have, I think, interesting news.
Thank you. Yeah, we shall continue probably a discussion more in that direction. I want to pass it to Dr. Svete. How do you perceive the quest for strategic autonomy, and what do you believe? What does it mean for Europe from your perspective?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Katya, for your question. Maybe I would like to expose a little bit different part of this content of strategic autonomy. What actually does it mean for us? I mean, for Europe, for European Union, for Slovenia, and I would like to start with the more, let's say, technical and more the digital perspective. Definitely, for me, this is very important topics regarding not just international relations, the relations within or with of the EU and with our allies in frame of transatlantic cooperation, but for the relations between our countries itself. For me, digitalization has the potential to become the incentive for economic growth and in Europe. So the last pandemic experience was just the latest proof for that. And the world is on the brink of the next stage of the fourth industrial revolution. In this particular frame, Europe has, from my point of view, enormous potential in the fields of data, artificial intelligence. Therefore, I'm really happy that we have today with us our colleague from Stefan Institute, Marko Grobarnik, and of course the Internet of Things. So this is something what I think that would really prevail the next economic, technical, and generally speaking, international relations. However, we must also address existing dependencies in the digital area. My colleague from Lithuania already exposed some very important countries which more or less are prevailing, are dominating the, let's say, technical or digital technology production. But still, I think that strategic autonomy in Europe, from my point of view, is more perceived as a resilience and more, in a way that we actually have some kind of influence how this technology would be developed in the near future. So for me, the strategic autonomy means, let's say, less dependence regarding any, I would say, center of power, and more, I would say, more to be encouraging European, let's say, position in worldwide. Therefore, identification of strategic areas and vulnerabilities of the EU represents an important starting point. So our industrial data, for instance, represents a massive resource, and the move towards edge computing should put Europe in much more favorable position than in the previous stage. This is something where we are talking about the IT as embedded technology. So the IT as kind of added value to, let's say, traditional industrial production. We should avoid a situation where non-European actors took the lead, for instance, in the area of personal data gathering or cloud computing, etc. So to achieve this, dialogue with industry needs to be strengthened. We aim for targeted and proportionate measures to address existing dependencies. So strategic autonomy is, for me, therefore, about being able to make choices. This is important, not to be isolated. And we want greater autonomy and greater independence in an open global environment. So that means that we are not breaking with globalization and global industrial or global technological production and development. And therefore, interdependence is natural, not or even desirable, but over-dependence, however, is not. So we should not be in a position where we can say that we are all dependent to particular producer or particular country. And over-dependence makes us, this is very, I would say, basic security paradigm, makes us vulnerable. In the digital sector, we can witness with supply of microprocessors or telecom infrastructure already mentioned before, we may be already reached this red line. So for me, strategic autonomy has nothing to do with protectionism, but is, as I say, it's more to be in the position to encourage our production, encourage our initiative, encourage our innovation and research and development, and of course, to strengthen our production in this particular sense.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Uroš. And if I build on that, I know we have this big dichotomy between actually knowing that Europe is interdependent and that we have this openness which we need in order to make the next step in digitalization, and the fact that we want to have more choices, like you said, we're able to make our own choices. Dr. Česnakas, how do you see this issue? And if what Uros said, what Dr. Sate said is true, then we need bigger and better cooperation. We need deeper cooperation. Do you see any anything that also prevents us from such deeper cooperation?
Thank you very much for the invitation. Well, I think we are living in a very interesting world now, because previously states had to defend their citizens physically. Now states are moving into defense of the citizens digitally as well. So this is absolutely a new kind of period in human history. And I think we are still talking not enough about how to protect the data of the citizens of the European Union from the other countries that can be used for different interests, and not only the citizens but also companies and as well. This increasing connectivity creates new challenges. However, what I see, what is happening in the world becomes a technologically polycentric system, meaning that each bigger state or great power tries to govern its digital technologies and technological innovations. Despite that, we are still having this link, and of course we are Europeans fighting for keeping internet free and open as much as possible. Unfortunately, movements from China, movements from Russia and other countries suggest that we are moving into more polycentric internet system, where states have some sort of sovereignty in here. We have to agree that most of the European Union countries are very small, and so each country cannot protect its data. And because we are having this free movement of goods, services, and workforce and others, we have to ensure that this free movement of data about citizens, companies, and as well could be ensured in European Union. Individually, countries can make some decisions, what the member of parliament from Lithuania already mentioned about 5G. However, 5G is only a hardware tool or hardware system, which we can have a software elements, but we also have to think about digital identities and so on. And this is a great sphere where we have to work. I'm not so sure that this increasing protectionism, I would call it a protectionism, will lead to greater cooperation. Why? First of all, I think this process in the European digital community and thinking about this called strategic autonomy already suggests that we want to disengage to some extent from other poles. At the same time, we are eager, and you can see this from the speeches of European Union leaders, that European Union is eager to form the data protection and normative elements about data protection, about digital technologies, and so on. So looking in the long-term perspective, European Union's economy is going to decline relative to the growing states, India, China, other economies. This will lead to some challenges, and declining economic role will also force Europeans to rethink if they are capable of suggesting these new norms and rules for other dominant powers. Obviously, that individual states cannot suggest these new rules and norms, and only European Union can do this. So we are in a very interesting period, in the period of who will set the norms for digital and technological future. As well, we see some challenges, as it was mentioned. I just checked among the 100 greatest companies in the world according to their capitalization. In digital technologies, we have only 4 from European Union, 2 from Netherlands and 2 from Germany. So this suggests that we have to rethink how to encourage creation of these new technological giants who would allow European Union to move its agenda in the future. And of course, this is related to competitiveness questions, to the regulation questions, and many other issues.
Thank you. That's a very exhaustive answer, and I mean, so many topics I could draw on. But let's move on to the issue that you mentioned of how to protect data, and kind of the issue that Uras raised about self-sufficiency, of how much we can actually produce in Europe. And there's two concerns that I hear that are most often voiced, and one is Europe's reliance on global cloud service providers and the disruption of supply chains, for instance, in microprocessors, etc. So those are kind of like vulnerabilities that I've in the discussions heard about of Europe. Now, looking at that, Dr. Grobelnik, I'll pass it on to you. You work in the sector daily. You are our AI whiz, so to say. How feasible is actual self-sufficiency, or in practice, could we actually close off? How feasible is actually, I mean, how does that look like in practice?
Yeah, in practice, it's not easy, right? So the problem is maybe even broader, right? Let me just structure a little bit this topic, right? So one topic which we are forgetting in this discussion is also brain drain from Europe, right? Everything starts from people, and unfortunately, people in Europe we have lots of brain, right? So lots of know-how, but unfortunately, this know-how still it's kind of seems like at least before COVID, right? It was running to US as soon as possible. So this is one thing which we need to be aware of, and this is also part of this digital independence. But your question was more like on the technological or digital side, right? So here I would say maybe 4 points which are kind of relevant. So one which we are seeing more or less every day is this simple cyber security. So not to be vulnerable towards attacks, right? So, but these are this is most likely the easiest part. So we get an attack, we defend ourselves, we get a little bit more resistance, and so on. But these are just surgical or anecdotal elements, right? So I think that one is kind of the easiest. The second thing is technological, right? So this you mentioned already, producing the chips and so on. In this sense, Europe and also Western world is in many ways dependent on the East, right? So this is something where we have strong dependency, which is not easy to replace on a short term, right? Even bigger and probably way more important is the infrastructure. So whenever we talk about, let's say, cloud computing, cloud services, right? Most of this is hidden, invisible, but in that sense, we are very dependent on US, right, Europe. So especially, so the big two giants in cloud computing are Google and Microsoft and Amazon, right? So if they would turn off their machines, most of the companies would fall down. So people are not even aware how much of this European or even global infrastructure is running on Amazon and Microsoft, right? So that one's possible to replace because infrastructure, it's this invisible part, but not on a short term, right? Then, okay, infrastructure, it's fine, right? Maybe we can replace it, right, with our own clouds, right? But then the problem is even bigger when it comes to services. Why services? Because how many times each of you today already searched on Google or checked, I don't know, Twitter, Facebook, or whatever other active, maybe opening Gmail, right, or something like this. So, or just mobile phone checking whatever service, right? So all these services are not European, right? And services are today basically split among US-based ones and Chinese ones, right? So in Europe, we are using mostly US ones. And this is not easy to replace, right? Just all these couple of trials which Europe had to build its own search engine or its own Google failed pretty much. So we are seeing the world through the search engine, which is not, let's say, European, and this will most likely stay, right? So what's the solution for this technology and services? I think, we cannot, most likely we cannot replace the existing infrastructure and the existing services with our own in the same way as China did, right? But better strategy would be to look forward for the next round, next line of solutions and services, because the world will look like different in like 5 and 10 years from now. And it's better, well, now we have opportunity to invest into services and solutions which will be relevant in 10 years from now, right? This could be autonomous driving, and 5G was mentioned, and many others, right? And just the last point, which we are aware of, but it's very hidden element, right? So today wars are not physical anymore, obviously, right? Okay, we have sort of cyber wars, right? Which are to some degree visible because we have damage, maybe, right? But the most important, I would say, is the war which you don't see, right? So today, with today's technology, and especially countries like Lithuania and the Baltic countries are exposed to this, right? So these are these info wars. Basically, with today's technology, you can basically move or split public opinion in, well, maybe not in a days or months, but in a year or two. You can do basically with public opinion in any country a lot, right? Automatically, right? Or with some kind of info-robotic technology. So this is maybe one of the biggest dangers which is caused by these dependencies. Now, how to deal with this? Well, we know for a couple of solutions, but it's really about complex solutions which are mostly automatic, mostly AI, right? Which are attacking and trying to shape public opinions across the country. So the only way is basically to fight back with AI, with appropriate AI. This is something which, why I'm saying this is important, because if these info wars are won by, let's say, opponents, right, then we wouldn't even have this kind of discussion anymore at some point, right? So this would be kind of maybe quick structuring of this domain, right? So first I said brain. We need to be careful about brain and know-how which we have, not to lose it, right? And then a couple of other things which are more technological.
Thank you, Marco. I appreciate that. I'll try to get back to you with a sub-question, but I want to turn now to Mr. Ubartas. From your point of view, how's the ICT sector developing, and how will the concept of strategic autonomy actually impact on that? So will we see more investment into AI, big data in Europe, or are we at risk of reinventing the wheel if we're trying to replicate world-class solutions that are already out there, that exist out there? What's your point of view on that? And just in 1 or 2 sentences, first tell us what Infobalt does, just to kind of put it in a context, yeah?
Infobalt is an association of IT and communication companies in Lithuania. We unite 165 members. So basically, we are covering the IT, technological, and communication companies which are acting in Lithuania, and we are promoting technology usage and promoting free market, and also the cybersecurity and the security of our country. So really interesting topics were mentioned, but I would be very direct with this political question of strategic autonomy. So basically, yes, we in Europe has lost technological war. Why? Because we are trying to do it not from the customer point of view, as US has built their technology companies. That was from demand, from serving the customers, from making the services best on another hand, that was in China, which developed technologies by regulation. And for me, it's a really, really strange approach from Europe that we are tending to use Chinese, Russian, North Korean means to get strategic autonomy on software. And we are trying to turn the back to our transatlantic alliance and the NATO partners who kept us safe, who kept us, who made us rich, and where we have the same values of liberal democracy. So when I'm talking about strategic autonomy, yes, there are issues. Yes, we are too much dependable from the East on supply chains, and this pandemic showed us a great lesson that putting all the penicillin supply in the world in China, when you need it, you cannot get it, and that's a bad situation. But also, I cannot understand our thinking in Europe that by regulations we will make innovations and we will make prosperity and democracy work. No, we have a great alliance, NATO, EU, where we need to work together in order to prosper our liberal democracy, human rights, and prosperity of humanity as we understand it, getting rich and getting free will. So I would say that Europe, with certain countries, with these millions pouring into the technology and trying to invent the wheel from search engine in 2008, where we failed miserably, instead of cooperation with the countries with which we share the same values and expanding and showing this way of life, we start protectionism by saying, no, 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 we are so special, we are so old, and now we will invent the wheel, whatever costs with the public money. No, that's not the way to go. The way to go is, I completely agree with colleagues, the way to go, if we want to get the strategic advantage in the future, is to develop the technologies of the future now. That's how, I really support Mr. Laurynas saying about 5G supply. That's how USA is fighting against China. They are cutting them from the future revenue streams of 5G. They are not dismantling 4G or 3G or 2G. They are saying, no, from 5G, you will get $0 or euros in the future. They should go further. When we are talking about Amazon, Microsoft, HP, Dell companies who are producing the servers, we should not forget that #1 producer of the servers in the world today is Huawei. We should not forget that #1 inverter for solar power plants producer is Huawei. So we are talking only about small part about 5G, about connectivity, which we need, but we are not talking about many other fields, about energy, about other supply chains where in EU we will invest a lot into this, into green economy and sustainable development, but we are still not thinking how to make it safe for ourselves. And here is our call, I would say, of Central Eastern Europe with digitalization, with the strategic alliance with USA companies. We are, McKinsey report shows that we are digital challengers. We are ahead, our economies are developing faster due to faster adaptation of digitalization and technologies which is produced not here, which are produced in USA. But we could grow our economies even faster and make our friends, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, who are lagging behind in digitalization, make all us more competitive while working together. Instead of that, we are trying to compete locally. We are looking to small RRF budgets, huge RRF budgets from our country's perspective, like Lithuania will invest 450 million into digitalization. But at the same time, there is a 132 billion euros investment in digitalization in EU. So we should look from our country's perspective, from our alliance perspective of this Central Eastern Europe, how to benefit from that, how to gain from that, not to start looking to USA, who is even protecting all our countries from gas pipe called Nord Stream, and saying, no, now we will build our own cloud, which has no demand. We will force the demand through the regulations. We will not get rich if we forget that the free market made us rich, not the regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Robertas. That was very straight to the point. I really appreciate such a candor and honesty on these discussions. At the risk of actually dominating the discussion for the next half an hour, I would really call on our participants and audience today to actually submit some questions as well. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. I will definitely take a look and submit it to the panel. Returning back a little bit to the transatlantic relations and this aspect. So, Mr. Robertas, based on what you've said, I would like to actually go back and emphasize the importance of democracies working together, which I think is the moment where we find ourselves in, because we are increasingly going to be drawn into this technological competition between China and the US, which are going to fight to retain global tech supremacy. And where does that leave Europe? So if I can go back to Dr. Kasčiūnas for a moment, could you please tell us your point of view on transatlantic cooperation, as well as how do you think this new proposal of EU-US Tech Trade Council should go forward? What's your view on that?
I'm very happy to hear what Mindaugas said. Of course, not to create some fortress Europe where we should not be as a fortress if we can cooperate with United States. And my concept is Europe will be strong if it will be transatlantic Europe. If it's a made condition for strong EU. And when I will want to share some experience on Lithuania. Of course, doing this new government, our new government raised the idea to have to achieve independence from unreliable technological suppliers. It's a broad topic. We started from 5G. We will go deeper to technologies which are in our infrastructure, in our strategic companies. We're also thinking how to do some ideas, how to change some norms even in the private sector, and this money fund from EU fund for digitalization. Part of them, we think we are proposing at least 10% should be invested in the cybersecurity. It's a proposal of my committee. We will have a discussions next week about it. But when we are trying to fight unreliable technological suppliers, in Lithuania we have very strong instrument, so-called National Security Commission, which according to our laws implements the investment screening. And we have some institution with experts from different institutions which got the information and makes a conclusion this investment is according to our national security or not. And we already made some strong decisions on some Chinese companies in different spheres. Where we wanted to invest and to sell their technology. And what is interesting, we banned them. We expelled them from our infrastructure, but when they suited to the court, and their main arguments, when we see the text, how their argumentation is EU law, freedom of movement of goods, movement of for freedoms and so on, where you see how EU law and EU regulation are used by for example Chinese companies to overcome our national regulation. And if we would like to talk about strategic autonomy, so first of all, let's talk about that. I mean, how EU law could help us to make our system safer, to create this control mechanisms or screening mechanisms which could leave a possibility to expel, to ban unreliable investors, technologies, and so on. That's why my idea, if you want to talk about strategic autonomy here, for example, you could develop really strong investment screening mechanisms, which we lack now. Now it's we a lot of things that we are doing nationally. We are national. Lithuania has very strong investment screening mechanism, but why we should not to spill over to EU level, EU to make it EU regulation. So if you want to make the EU stronger in this sphere, I would propose to move to this direction. Thank you.
Thank you. We're getting a question from the audience, and I will take it right now. What do you think about the initiative of the European Commission to establish the new EU-US Trade and Technology Council? How we can jointly maximize opportunities for market-driven transatlantic collaboration and strengthen our technological and industrial leadership and expand bilateral trade and investment. You also have it on chat because that was quite a long question, so you can take a look. Dr. Svete, would you like to pick that up?
Thank you. Yes, I can maybe. Is of course interesting idea how to strengthen the cooperation, I mean, between the EU and US. But maybe, if I may, I would like to go a little bit back to the discussion, because I think that regarding the European autonomy, that we are maybe sometimes trying to find or to expose not the real problem or not the real challenge. I mean, there is no question about that. From security perspective, we have to develop and have to strengthen the Euro-Atlantic cooperation. There is no doubt that the European autonomy in the technology means to be more effective and efficient. But maybe I have to expose the question. So what is for me very basic and very initiative challenge? My question actually is not how to substitute some company, either coming from the EU, US or China. My question is why European Union is now in a position where we are really in a, I would say for now, like losers of globalization, and we are now not anymore in a position to dominate and to be adequately a member of international community, which is crucial for further technology development. So my question is why we have just 4 companies among top 100 most valuable or valid companies in the IT. Why do we not have any IT giant anymore in the European Union? So why we are losing the dominance we had it from the very beginning of mobile communications? Of course, I can expose Ericsson and Nokia and some other pioneers. Why they are losing their positions? Why they are losing this, I would say, turnover from hardware to software, where it was obvious that the US companies were becoming much more efficient. And the next question, why the US now is trying so hard to expose the question of technology? Because this is definitely the fact that the US position regarding technology is obviously, or the US maybe perceive that their position regarding technology is not so strong anymore as it was since 60s or 70s, as it was, let's say, the peak of the Cold War. So China is definitely developing its power based on the IT more quickly and more, I would say, ambitious than the US and the European. And these questions are, for me, crucial when we are debating autonomy, yes, or autonomy not. I don't know, US cloud or Chinese cloud. This is, for me, not the basic question. For me, is the basic question why we have brain drain, why our professionals and experts are moving to US, why the European Union companies are losing the position, why the added value of our economy based on the IT is losing the competition with China or US. This is something what for me is crucial for, let's say, the topic of European technological autonomy or sovereignty.
So that we actually then come back to the question of how do we achieve strategic autonomy? If that is the case, Uroš, I think you've really highlighted some crucial challenges. Dr. Česnakas, what do you see are the possibilities for the EU to shape the global digital agenda? And if you wanted to also respond on the transatlantic question, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Well, first of all, in my personal opinion, we should discard this term strategic autonomy in technologies in Europe, because I think it's a very false term. If we are ambitious in Europe, we can call it a European digital breakthrough. I don't know, just not to show that we are disconnecting from someone, as my colleague Mindaugas mentioned, yes, but showing the aspiration that we can compete with American, Chinese companies by doing European stuff, okay? So, and of course, I would obviously support Mindaugas that European companies should compete with American on the market-based, not on the Chinese regulation-based environment. But why we are in this, to some extent, from European point of view, unfortunate point is, first of all, we have a very strong regulations in European Union about the development of big companies. We always try to limit the expansion of particular companies by forcing them to sell some, branches or whatever. So this limits the emergence of global of European super giants technological, Microsoft, Apple, or Amazon, whatever. So the second element is that Europeans, though they fund research and development, they are not capable of, on the large scale, extremely large scale, to introduce them into market as goods or services. The European Union provides a lot of finances for education and research and development. Unfortunately, we lack capabilities or know-how to make this into products that consumers would use. The third element is over-bureaucratization. Over-bureaucratization, it's a very, the problem is that we have an enormous bureaucracy system in European Union, which, doesn't look into how this one or other research can be implemented with the least resistance. But on the other hand, we have a lot of things how we should move this bureaucracy to get one or another signature and a lot of troubling things. In US, you have the idea, you go to the big company, you say, we have the idea, let's do the business, And in Europe, we have a lot of bureaucracy and we are not capable of implementing things. And the fourth I would address, this European strategic autonomy in digital sphere, I think is a bit, it's a bit a company support system for the big European countries. Why? If we introduce this term strategic autonomy and we will move with this decoupling, so to speak, we will be forced to some extent by European products. The same thing is actually happening in the defense sector already. So we probably will be forced to buy not the best products we can get on the market, but to buy European products, which might not necessarily be the best. So we will also think where those money will go and whose interests are there as well. So I'm talking about this in order for small countries to get benefits from this, and small countries like Sweden, other countries, Finland, Lithuania as well, they get best results from free market, from competition. And we should encourage this competition in EU, not to decrease it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rubartis, I would follow up on the issue of small countries. There's a difference between small countries and bigger EU member states, I guess. Will the tech policies driving in the direction of strategic autonomy, in your view, have a disproportionate effect on the smaller EU member states, so basically our countries? And in that sense of having less access to cutting edge technology and new economic opportunities?
I completely agree with Mr. Česnakas. We should not, we should forget about this autonomy as a word at all. We should be a transatlantic alliance as we are, and we should compete on market conditions, not regulation conditions. Why? Very simple example, not from the digital world. European Union regulated the emission of the cars so badly, so well. And what we produced? Dieselgate. That's what we made. USA didn't do regulations too much, didn't do what they produced, bloody Tesla. So there is a difference of driving innovation, market-based innovation, and regulation-based innovation. We are proud in Europe that our regulation got adopted there and there on GDPR, on now we are adopting AI, white papers and doing other stuff. And when I read this one, if European Union would be writing the regulation, how to invent the fork, we would still eat by hands, because with the fork you can stab somebody, you know, but at the same time you can eat with it. Yeah. So we are limiting our innovations by design, by these regulations. That's one. We are limiting our global dominance. We used to be global dominant. Okay, nobody wants to remember these days, but the Portugal, Spain, we found America, we found all the routes, we were dominating all the, UK was dominating in Europe, yeah, all the oceans, and the sun was never setting down. And somewhere we got over proud about it. We got our wars here. We were fighting with each other, and we today continue fighting, not with the weapons, but with the power. Big countries are getting advantage. They are not looking to the small countries' interest, and that's what we are here. Yeah, we have a cultural difference. Answer why the USA is able to commercialize the inventions is that they don't have a border in the world. Yeah, they are looking from the perspective, if there is a business, let's do the business. When you are working for European company, you don't feel that you are working in global company. I have spent quite a lot of time working for Swedish companies. You are also always working in a Swedish company with subsidiary abroad. You are not equal. Yeah? When there is a USA company in Switzerland, you don't feel any differences. Are you talking one language or another language? Are you from Lithuania or from the France? Everybody is equal and striving for one goal. When you are working, we have a different culture. We have a protectionism culture. 5 years in USA and you are citizen with the wife, house, dog, and white fence. Free
and a minivan.
Yeah, and a minivan. And 3 generations in Lithuania, and you will still be reminded that you are not the Lithuanian one. and in France, they don't know who is French, who is not. So we are culturally built quite closed. So in this sense, we need to have more ambition and not to be afraid of the world, and go together with our allies to learn from them and to be more open. The innovation, let's not do any more Dieselgates. Let's do the AI. Let's allow our brains not to drain, allow them to invent here.
Right, and that's a very fair point. And I want to pick up on that and say that, I mean, in that sense, R&D really is the cornerstone of strategic autonomy, but then we have real data that shows that compared to US and China, the global R&D share of European companies in ICT industries actually retracted by more than 8% compared to 2017. But that's because the US and China invest so much more. Partially has to do with, I guess, capability. But then, Dr. Kasčiūnas, I want to come back to you and ask you that. So what should we do? I mean, we certainly need more investment, probably into startups, into scale-ups, but should we also look at pooling resources? Do we need more cooperation, specifically in Central Eastern Europe region?
Yes, of course, we can pool the resources, but of course we should have a vision what we need to do. And I think today we had such called deconstruction of concept of strategic autonomy. You know, because we should always ask what is our main aim. You know, and there was a Dieselgate example, but also, you know, sometimes how we misunderstood trying to make a mistake when we're trying to understand why we need this strategic autonomy. For example, also from defense sphere, European Defense Fund or PESCO, and with idea, look, let's support European military capabilities, let's support the European military industry, but we see what it's the interest of one or another country of EU to create, to make the regulation which will help them to sell their products. And as Mr. Česnakas said, maybe not the best products. And for our country, for example, which wants to have a possibility to choose which military to purchase, which military, for example, technology to invest, we now, for example, in the future should be pushed to buy only European or maybe French products, which may be not the best, one thing. Another thing is we would like to invest geopolitically in our strategic partners, United States. Without United States, I cannot even imagine the security architecture of Europe, and especially our region. But of course, where we can cooperate and we can like to pool our resources, of course we will support that. It's of course the idea which we can consider, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. We are almost out of time, but I do want to very quickly raise two more topics. First with Uroš, which is something that we didn't even get to talk about much today, is cybersecurity. I mean, there are legitimate reasons in ways where we have to protect Europe, and one is cybersecurity. Could you kindly, really in a minute, just give us a view on that, Uroš, please?
Yes, thank you, Katja, for this very important question. Definitely is cybersecurity due to the fact that we are depending more and more on the IT infrastructure. One of the crucial points, not just for us, but I mean for our administration, but for technologically developed countries worldwide. And if I may, definitely I will have to expose some of the concrete mechanisms, how we see the future of the strategic autonomy and cybersecurity. I mean that very important step forward from the European autonomy regarding cybersecurity and the investments in the infrastructure and the innovations is the establishment or setting up of the European Cyber Competence Center. This is something we really support and appreciate, and not just the center with the city in Bucharest, Romania, but all the network across the member states will definitely support local investments to the cybersec products, to the research and innovation, to academia. This is something we really will have to do, and which will have, according to my mind, very concrete I would say results. Then I would expose the approach to the standardization and certification. So although in short term, as Marco said, we will not be able to compete with US or Chinese companies, but we should develop the way how to certificate and standardize the products. Dieselgate is, of course, very big trauma for the EU and regulation in the EU, and we should make lessons learned for this scandal, and definitely standardization in the area of IoT, in the area of cybersec is something what should we have in mind in the short term.
Thank you, Uroš, for also being brief. Dr. Česnakas, I will let you have the last word on particularly CEE cooperation, Central Eastern Europe cooperation. This is the other part I wanted to bring up. Do you see a role for our countries in bonding closer together, in having more of an influence, since we do seem to hold similar point of views on this topic?
Well, thank you. I think, being brief, I would say that we should not move into deeper regionalization in European Union. We're regionalizing from United States, trying to decouple with the strategic autonomy. And if we are trying to regionalize already in Central Eastern European region without Western Europe, I think we are just splitting our capabilities. I say just one data for you. By 2030, Chinese plan to have 35,000 researchers and scientists working on artificial intelligence. How many such of these sciences we're planning to have in European Union? That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Ubartas, you have your hand up, if I understand correctly. Do you want to have a very short thought before we really have to close off?
So my topic would be for CEE and for Europe. In order to be compatible, we need to be become more homogeneous on digital area. So basically, in the EU, we have built quite a good concepts of interoperability, of building blocks of identity, free movement, free market, and everything. We should be the pioneers to implement it, that we would have a cross-border data economy starting to flow, and then use it as a competitive advantage. That's where we, being small, fast countries, can benefit, and not to be against somebody, but to gain competitive advantage and make Europe competitive even more. But instead of that, even in our small countries, we are quite building the digital border still. So we need to use the advantage of EU to become stronger together, inside and outside, not to build additional walls from our allies, from USA, from NATO, and from others.
Thank you so much. That's a very strong concluding thought. And I see lots of heads nodding on the webinar. So I think on this very strong thought where we're all in agreement, I think we really need to conclude because we're a bit over time. I would really like to thank you. It's been a fascinating discussion. To all of the participants also for joining us. This is actually, we're not finished yet. We're continuing our series of webinars on the 2nd of June. We're going to have another discussion on regional cooperation on digital transformation. So we are now closing off with the discussion of Central Eastern European region, and we will pick it up on the 2nd of June with a panel from Central Eastern European region again on closer cooperation of our region. So with that, everybody, thank you so much. I wish you a great rest of the afternoon and stay tuned. Thank you.